The sea is endless. Its waves rise and fall, carrying whispers older than memory itself. Listen closely. Beneath the sound of water, a deeper voice calls. It is the voice of a god, born of the earth and sky, yet master of the oceans. He is Poseidon, brother of Zeus and Hades, ruler of the vast and restless sea. His domain stretches beyond the horizon, where sunlight fades into mystery. Fishermen pray to him before sailing, and sailors fear his sudden storms. He can calm the waves with a thought, or raise tempests that shake the world. His trident strikes the deep, and the earth trembles in silent reverence. To the ancients, Poseidon was more than a god. He was power itself. He was the unbroken rhythm of tides, the thunder beneath the ground. Legends tell of his palace beneath the waves, built of coral and shining gems. There, seahorses and dolphins danced, and Amphitrite, his queen, reigned beside him. But Poseidon's story is not only of oceans. It is of rivalry, love, and fate. Tonight, we sail into his world, where myths breathe and waters speak. This is the tale of Poseidon, lord of tempests and quakes. In the beginning, the world was young, and the gods had not yet taken their thrones. The sky stretched vast, the earth was wide, and the sea rolled without a master. In that ancient time, Cronus, ruler of the Titans, feared the fate foretold. He heard a prophecy that one of his children would rise to overthrow him. So, Cronus swallowed each child as they were born, sealing their light in darkness. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon vanished into his great shadow. Yet fate cannot be silenced, and destiny flows like a hidden river under stone. When Rhea, his wife, gave birth to the last child, she refused to surrender him. She hid the newborn Zeus upon the island of Crete, far from Cronus's gaze. A stone wrapped in cloth was given instead, and Cronus devoured it blindly. Meanwhile, Poseidon lay within the belly of his father, trapped in silence. No waves, no sky, no air. Only the weight of eternal night surrounded him. But within the hearts of the swallowed gods, sparks of power began to stir. The world outside shifted, mountains rose, and seas deepened, waiting for release. The Titanomachy, the war of gods and titans, would soon reshape all creation. When Zeus grew strong, he sought to free his siblings from the prison of Cronus. With cunning and courage, he tricked the great Titan and opened the path. One by one, his brothers and sisters emerged from darkness into light. Poseidon stepped forth, reborn into a world that trembled at their return. The air filled with thunder as the gods reclaimed their rightful place. Grateful to Zeus, Poseidon joined the rising tide of rebellion against the Titans. The Cyclopes, ancient smiths, forged gifts for each Olympian in secret. For Poseidon, they shaped a weapon unlike any other, the trident of storms. It gleamed with sea's power, carrying the roar of waves and quake of earth. With each strike, mountains could tremble, and oceans would obey his call. The three brothers stood united, each bearing gifts of cosmic might. Zeus wielded thunder, Hades held shadows, and Poseidon commanded the deep. The war against Cronus and the Titans raged across sky, sea, and land. Titans hurled mountains, and gods answered with fire, storm, and shadow. Yet Poseidon's trident was more than a weapon. It was a force of balance. When waves rose to crash against Titan strongholds, Poseidon guided their wrath. When the ground shook beneath their enemies, his strike had stirred the earth. He was no longer a swallowed child, but a god in his own right. The war lasted 10 long years, shaking the foundation of the world itself. At last, the Titans were defeated, their rule broken, their thrones overturned. Cronus fell, his prophecy fulfilled, and the age of the Olympians began. The brothers gathered, their new dominion stretching across creation's vastness. But how would they divide the realms? The question hung heavy among them. By lot, they drew their fates, letting chance decide the shape of eternity. Zeus gained the sky, where thunder ruled and light spread over the earth. Hades received the underworld, where shadows embraced the souls of mortals. Poseidon's lot was the sea, the unending expanse of waves and hidden deeps. Thus, he became lord of the oceans, master of storms, and earthshaker. From the darkness of Cronus's belly, he rose to rule the endless waters. The sea found its master, and the world forever remembered his name. This was the birth of Poseidon, not as a child, but as a god. And so begins the journey of the Lord of Tempests and Quakes. The war of the gods and titans was more than thunder and stone. It was the shaping of destiny. Poseidon stood with his brothers and sisters, each carrying the burden of a cosmic struggle. The sky roared with Zeus's lightning, and the earth shook with Poseidon's mighty strikes. The titans, vast and ancient, hurled mountains, seeking to crush the rising gods. But the Olympians were not alone, for allies came from deep and hidden places. The Cyclopes, freed from their prison, forged weapons of power for the young gods. For Zeus, thunderbolts that split the sky and blinded the eyes of titans. For Hades, a helm of darkness that cloaked him in shadow and fear. And for Poseidon, the trident that could stir the seas and fracture the land. Each weapon was a promise, a spark of hope in the long war against Cronus. Poseidon wielded his trident with force, summoning tempests to crash against Titan armies. Oceans rose like walls, swallowing the battlefields, drowning the roars of their enemies. The ground itself trembled when he struck, and even mountains bowed before him. Mortals of that age told stories of the earth shaking in endless waves. They said the seas rose higher than the skies, and stars themselves quivered in fear. Poseidon was more than a warrior. He was the rhythm of nature unleashed. Every crash of water, every quake beneath the soil, echoed his growing power. The war lasted years, a struggle so vast that even time seemed to hesitate. At night, the gods whispered plans by firelight, weary but unwilling to yield. Poseidon's presence was steady, like the sea, relentless and unbroken by defeat. He was the tide that always returned, the storm that never lost its strength. Against him, the Titans saw not only a god, but the force of creation itself. Cronus, mighty though he was, felt the weight of his children rising together. Poseidon's strikes weakened the ground beneath him, shaking the throne of the Titan. Side by side with Zeus and Hades, he pressed forward without fear. Together they forged unity, and unity became their greatest strength in battle. For 10 long years the war burned, echoing across every mountain and sea. But no chain of stone or shadow could hold back the will of destiny. The Titans grew weary, their might faltering before the unyielding strength of the gods. One by one they fell, and their cries faded like storms breaking at dawn. Poseidon's trident flashed in the darkness, calling the seas to his side. The waters answered, roaring, striking against the bastions of the Titans. The balance shifted, the war tilted, and victory drew near for the Olympians. Finally, with a final surge of power, Cronus was cast down by his sons. The world itself sighed with relief, as silence followed the storm of ages. The Titans were bound, their rule ended, their voices lost to forgotten echoes. The Olympians stood tall, claiming the dawn of a new age upon the earth. Poseidon, with his brothers, looked upon the wide world they had won. Yet victory carried a question greater than battle: how to divide the realms. The sky stretched endless, the sea rolled forever, and the underworld waited in shadow. They drew lots, letting chance decide the measure of their eternal rule. Zeus rose as king of the skies, master of thunder and law. Hades descended to the underworld, keeper of souls and unseen riches. Poseidon claimed the sea, boundless and deep, where mysteries hid in every tide. Thus the war ended, and order returned, but nothing would ever be the same. The gods had risen, the titans had fallen, and a new world had begun. Poseidon's name echoed with thunder, and the sea bowed to his will. From the chaos of battle, he had emerged as Lord of the Deep, and in his trident, the memory of war lived forever, sharp as the sea's edge. This was the Titanomachy, the war that birthed the age of the Olympians. And in its heart, Poseidon stood as unshaken as the endless tide. The war had ended, and silence stretched across the heavens, the earth, and the sea. The Titans were cast into shadow, and the Olympians rose to rule the new order. Among them, Poseidon walked the shorelines of the world he now called his own. The sea stretched before him, boundless and untamed, whispering its secrets in waves. It had no master, no keeper, no voice to command its restless depths. Poseidon looked upon it and felt its power mirror the storm within him. The trident gleamed in his hand, a gift of thunder and tide from the Cyclopes. With it, he could summon waves, calm storms, or shake the very earth itself. But the sea was not only a weapon, it was a home waiting to be claimed. Poseidon descended into the deep, and the waters welcomed him like kin. The farther he traveled, the more he saw worlds hidden from mortal eyes. Coral forests swayed in silence. Fish glimmered like living jewels in the dark. Caves of pearl and stone stretched endlessly, carved by time and mystery. And in the heart of the ocean, Poseidon raised his palace from the depths. It was a hall of wonder, built of coral walls and shimmering crystal arches. Jewels from the seabed shone in its chambers, casting light like underwater stars. Columns rose like kelp forests, and floors glittered with shells polished by waves. There, Poseidon seated himself upon a throne carved from ivory and gold. It was not the throne of conquest, but of dominion, of harmony with the sea. Around him swam dolphins, seahorses, and creatures both fierce and gentle. They came as subjects, yet Poseidon saw them as companions of his realm. In time, legend said his chariot was drawn by hippocamps, half horse, half fish. They galloped through waves as if the ocean were air, leaving foams like clouds. When Poseidon rode the sea, mortals trembled and prayed for mercy at his passing. To fishermen, he was the giver of bounty, filling nets with silver shoals. To sailors, he was the storm bringer, raising winds that carried or destroyed. To islanders, he was the earth shaker, shaking land when angered or ignored. Yet Poseidon was not only wrath, but also protector, father, and guide of waters. His trident, though mighty, was also a symbol of balance between calm and storm. He could grant safe harbors, gentle tides, and winds that carried ships home. But if forgotten or dishonored, he could raise tempests no mast could endure. In his palace beneath the waves, Poseidon ruled with both majesty and mystery. There was Amphitrite, the sea goddess who became his queen and companion. Together, they shaped a court of sea nymphs, dolphins, and spirits of the deep. Their children were said to inherit powers of wave, storm, and the horse. Mortals told stories of Poseidon's presence whenever the sea changed its face. When calm waters mirrored the sky, they said the gods smiled upon the earth. When storms rose without warning, they whispered of Poseidon's shifting moods. His realm was vast, stretching farther than mortals could dream or map. Every island, every harbor, every tide belonged to his watchful gaze. The Greeks honored him with temples built close to the sea's edge. There they prayed for journeys, for rains, for harvests, and for the earth's stillness. They offered horses, salt, and gifts, symbols of his dual dominion. For Poseidon was not only lord of waters, but also creator of the horse. The power of the sea and the strength of the steed were one in him. Mortals feared him, but they also loved and revered him as a giver of life. For without the sea the world could not live, and without him the sea was chaos. So Poseidon stood, no longer only the child of Cronus or brother of Zeus. He was the master of the sea, lord of tempests and quakes, unshaken and eternal. And as the waves broke upon every shore, his name traveled with them forever. The sea was Poseidon's realm, but his power stretched far beyond the waves. He was not only lord of oceans, but master of the trembling earth beneath. When mortals felt the ground shudder, they whispered his name in fear and awe. For Poseidon held the title Earthshaker, a god whose strikes moved mountains. His trident was not a symbol alone, it was the channel of his might. With one thrust, the sea roared, and with another, the earth cracked open. The Greeks believed earthquakes were not mere chance, but Poseidon's voice of anger. When cities fell or islands split, they said the god had struck the ground. To mortals, the sea and the earth were one, united by Poseidon's rule. He was the bridge between the calm of water and the fury of stone. Sailors prayed for calm winds, while farmers begged the ground to stay still. His dual nature shaped him as a god both feared and worshipped with devotion. Legends tell of Poseidon striking cliffs to raise islands from the sea. Other tales speak of him sinking lands with a wave of his mighty hand. The earth moved as the sea moved, and Poseidon's will bound them together. This power gave him a presence unlike any other among the Olympians. Zeus ruled the sky above, Hades the shadows below. But Poseidon touched both. He reached upward with storms and downward with quakes that rattled the underworld. Mortals built temples to honor him, not just by the sea, but inland. Wherever the ground was restless, people turned their eyes to the Earthshaker. At Troezen, Helike, and Corinth, his worship was strong and deeply rooted. They saw him as protector of cities, even when his quakes reminded them of fear. For Poseidon's wrath was sudden, and none could know when it would strike. Yet he was not chaos for its own sake, but balance in motion. Without storms, there is no calm, and without tremors, no stillness to cherish. He embodied the truth that life is fragile, yet held by divine rhythm. When ships sank in storms, survivors prayed louder, honoring his strength and mercy. When earthquakes toppled walls, builders laid new foundations in his sacred name. His power demanded reverence, teaching mortals that the earth and sea live as one. Poseidon's title, Earthshaker, carried both dread and admiration across the ancient world. No king, no army, no mortal could match the tremor of his trident. He reminded all that the gods were not distant but present in every quake. The sailors said the rumble underfoot was Poseidon walking through hidden caves. Farmers believed tremors meant he was restless, stirring beneath their fields of grain. Priests offered horses, salt, and wine to calm his moods and steady the land. For Poseidon was also the giver of fertility through the waters of the earth. Springs and rivers were his gifts, flowing life from mountain to plain. Earthquakes, storms, rains, and tides, each a thread in the tapestry of his power. In stories, he was quick to anger, but equally quick to restore calm. His hand might shake the earth, yet it also gave harvests after the rain. This was the dual mystery of Poseidon, destroyer and sustainer in one, a god whose power lay in motion, in change, in the shifting of worlds. Mortals saw this and bowed, knowing their lives rested upon his will. The ground beneath their feet and the sea before their eyes were his domain. And when both trembled together, it was his spirit moving through creation. Thus, Poseidon, lord of tempests, became forever the earth-shaker in memory. His trident a reminder that nothing stands unmoved when the god commands. The earth quakes, the sea roars, and the name of Poseidon echoes eternal. Poseidon, though mighty, was not alone in the realm of the sea. Beside him stood Amphitrite, the queen who ruled the waters with grace. She was a Nereid, one of the daughters of Nereus, the wise old man of the sea. Amphitrite shone with calmness, balancing the storms her husband often raised. Her beauty was said to rival the waves themselves, glittering under the sun. When Poseidon first sought her hand, she fled across the waters in fear. The god of the sea was powerful, and his presence filled her with awe. But legends tell how the dolphin, faithful servant of Poseidon, pursued her. The dolphin carried gentle words, promising her a throne beside the sea lord. Amphitrite agreed, and her marriage sealed the harmony of the ocean realm. In gratitude, Poseidon placed the dolphin among the stars, a shining constellation. Together, Poseidon and Amphitrite ruled from a palace of coral and crystal. Their halls were filled with sea nymphs, musicians, and creatures of the deep. The songs of the sea echoed in those chambers, soft as flowing tides. Amphitrite's presence soothed her husband's temper and calmed the waters. She was a goddess of dignity, guiding mortals to honor the sea with offerings. When sailors prayed, they did not only call on Poseidon, but also on her. They believed her gentle hand could shield them from the god's fury. She represented the stillness of calm waters after storms had passed. To the Greeks, their union showed the balance between might and gentleness. Where Poseidon's power shook the world, Amphitrite restored its harmony. Together, they became the living rhythm of chaos and calm. Stories tell that Amphitrite adorned herself with pearls and seafoam crowns. Her robes shimmered like flowing water, woven from the fabric of the sea. She was not a goddess of war or wrath, but of grace and devotion. Her children with Poseidon also carried the legacy of the ocean's power. Among them was Triton, the herald of the sea, half man and half fish. He blew his conch shell to calm or raise the waves at his father's will. Triton's voice was said to echo across the coasts, carrying the sea's command. Other children of Poseidon and Amphitrite became guardians of the deep. They symbolized the many faces of the ocean, its peace, its mystery, its strength. The bond between Poseidon and Amphitrite was not always without storms. Like the sea itself, their marriage had tides of conflict and reconciliation. But always, Amphitrite's wisdom tempered Poseidon's restless spirit. She taught mortals that the sea was not only a place of fear, it was also a source of beauty, abundance, and endless wonder. Fishermen blessed her name when nets came back heavy with silver fish. Mothers prayed to her for safe return of sons sailing into uncertain waters. Her kindness lived in the calm seas that carried ships safely to shore. Through Amphitrite, mortals saw a gentler face of divine power. The sea was not only storms, but also the cradle of life. In her, the ocean's mysteries became less harsh, more inviting, more nurturing. Amphitrite's story reminds us that even gods need balance to reign. Poseidon, without her, would be only tempest, quake, and fury. With her, he was also depth, calm, and the rhythm of tides. Their palace beneath the sea became a symbol of unity and rule. a reminder that power is strongest when joined with wisdom and grace. In every ripple of calm water, Amphitrite's spirit lingers, eternal as the waves. She remains the queen beside the sea god, forever guiding his restless storms. And together, they embody the ocean itself, vast, mighty, and eternal. The sea god was not only a ruler of waters, but also a father of many. Poseidon's children walked between the mortal and divine, carrying fragments of his power. Some were gentle spirits of the waves, while others bore strength that echoed storms. Each child reflected a different face of the ocean's vast and restless nature. Among his most known was Triton, the herald of the deep seas. Triton, half man and half fish, blew his great conch to command the waters. When he sounded the shell, waves rose or sank, obeying the call of his breath. He was a trusted companion to sailors, guiding them across uncertain tides. Legends tell of him calming storms with his music, lulling the sea to peace. Others say he frightened enemies with a blast that rumbled like thunder. But Triton was only one voice in the chorus of Poseidon's family. Many children of the god were born from unions with nymphs and mortals. Some brought harmony, while others became symbols of fear or pride. These offspring were not always heroes, but living signs of divine connection. One tale speaks of Theseus, son of a mortal queen, and Poseidon himself. Theseus grew to be a hero who united Athens through courage and wisdom. He was said to carry the strength of the sea in his bloodline. When he lifted the great stone to claim his father's sword, the people marveled. His journey showed how Poseidon's legacy stretched beyond the waves. The god's presence lived on through mortal sons who shaped kingdoms and legends. Yet Poseidon's children were not only tied to the land of men. Some embodied the wildness of nature, like sea nymphs who danced with tides. Others became rulers of rivers, lakes, or distant coasts touched by the ocean. Every child of Poseidon held within them a current of divine energy. They were streams flowing outward from the source, carrying his spirit into the world. Mortals looked upon them with awe, for they bridged heaven and earth. To worship Poseidon was also to honor his children as guides of the sea. They stood as reminders that the ocean's reach is endless, touching every shore. The stories of his lineage were sung in harbors and told by firelight. They spoke of divine power passed down, shaping the fate of men and cities. But not all tales of his children were gentle or glorious. Some carried the darker moods of their father, fierce as a storm. A few were monstrous beings, feared by sailors who saw them rise from the deep. Yet even they held meaning, for they revealed the untamed truth of nature. The sea could not be only calm. It needed both beauty and terror. So too did Poseidon's offspring embody the full spectrum of ocean's force. To the Greeks, these children were not distant myths, but living lessons. They taught respect for waters that gave life, yet demanded humility. Every name, every tale, carried the mark of Poseidon's trident. He was a god whose presence spread through generations, both mortal and divine. His family was not bound by palace walls, but by waves that never ceased. From Triton's guiding call to Theseus's heroic strength, his bloodline echoed power. Through them, mortals touched a piece of eternity, hearing the sea within themselves. And in every child, Poseidon's essence flowed, like rivers returning to the ocean. The god was not only one, but many, reflected in those he left behind. Thus, his story deepened, not just of storms, but of legacy across time, a legacy that whispered through tides, reminding all of the sea's eternal reach. Poseidon was not only a god of waters and quakes, but also a shaper of lands. The ancients told how he could raise islands or sink them beneath the waves. Every strike of his trident carried the promise of new creation or sudden loss. The sea was his canvas, and the earth itself was clay in his hands. One legend speaks of how Poseidon created the horse from sea foam and power. This gift tied him to both land and sea, uniting two worlds under his rule. The horse became sacred to him, a symbol of speed, strength, and untamed force. Just as the waves surged, so too did the gallop of the divine stallion. When chariots thundered across battlefields, men remembered Poseidon's invention. For he was not only Tempest, but also the father of swift creation. The Greeks honored him at the Isthmian Games, held in Corinth every 2 years. There, athletes raced horses and competed in his name, praising the Earthshaker. The games were not only contests of strength, but offerings to their sea lord. Victory was seen as a blessing, proof of Poseidon's favor upon the athlete. His bond with horses was also tied to his role as a god of fertility. The rains he sent nourished fields, and the rivers carried life to farmlands. Crops flourished under his gaze, linking the god of oceans to the land's harvest. Farmers prayed for steady rains and fertile soil, as sailors prayed for calm seas. Thus, Poseidon stood at the heart of both survival and prosperity for the Greeks. He was worshipped not only by sailors, but by farmers, kings, and common folk. Temples to him rose on coastlines and inland, where tremors shook the earth. His image was carved in stone, holding the trident, standing firm and unyielding. Worshippers brought offerings of bulls, rams, and sometimes horses to honor him. They poured libations of wine into the sea, hoping to calm his storms. At Helike, his sanctuary stood as a beacon of faith for all Greece. There, the people gathered to pray, seeking protection from quakes and waves. But when they failed in their devotion, the earth itself shifted in reminder. The sea swallowed the city whole, and Helike was lost beneath the waters. This tale became a lesson that Poseidon's favor could not be taken lightly. He demanded reverence, not only in calm times, but in every breath of life. For his power touched all things, from the shorelines to the depths of soil. Sailors whispered his name before voyages, casting salt into the waves as tribute. They believed a small gift could soften the god's unpredictable temper. Fishermen prayed at dawn, hoping his mercy would fill their nets with silver. Each prayer was a thread in the bond between mortals and the sea god. Festivals in his honor filled harbors with song, dance, and bright processions. People decorated altars with seashells, wreaths, and tokens from the ocean. The sound of drums echoed like the beating heart of the sea itself. Worship was not born only of fear, but also of gratitude and wonder. For Poseidon's hand was not always heavy, nor his storms always cruel. He could bring calm seas, gentle rains, and fertile lands when honored well. He was the god who reminded mortals that balance lay in respect. To praise him was to acknowledge the deep connection between land and water. Without the sea, there was no trade, no travel, no harvest blessed by rain. Without the earth, there was no home, no temple, no resting place for life. Poseidon bound these worlds together, ruling where they touched and merged. His worship was a bridge of devotion, spanning sea foam and solid ground. And through prayers, offerings, and games, the Greeks lived within his rhythm. They saw him not only as destroyer, but as guardian of survival itself. A god whose storms taught humility, and whose gifts nourished the world. So in every temple, on every shore, his name was carved eternal. Poseidon, lord of tempests and quakes, master of both sea and earth. Poseidon's might was vast, but his influence reached far beyond storms and waves. He was a god whose moods shaped the lives of mortals in countless unseen ways. When sailors prayed for safe passage, it was Poseidon they begged for mercy. When farmers longed for rain, they called upon him to water their thirsty fields. His power was not limited to oceans, but tied deeply to the balance of nature. The Greeks knew him as more than tempest. He was rhythm, cycle, and renewal. Rivers carried his blessing inland, feeding cities and keeping kingdoms alive. Without his rains and tides, the world would starve and trade would wither away. Fishermen sang his name at dawn, believing their nets would fill with his grace. They whispered to the waves, hoping for calm seas and generous harvests. The sea's bounty was a reminder that Poseidon could nurture as well as punish. In coastal villages, festivals honored him with music, dance, and salty offerings. Children placed seashells on altars, while elders poured wine into the waves. The ceremonies were filled with gratitude, for the ocean was life's greatest gift. Yet every celebration carried a note of caution, for his temper was legendary. People remembered stories of storms that swallowed fleets in moments of fury. They told tales of quakes that split the ground, leaving cities trembling in fear. These stories were warnings, teaching respect for the god's unpredictable power. But they also revealed something deeper, a bond between man and divine. For Poseidon was not a distant ruler. He was present in every crashing wave. He was in the spray of the sea, in the rumble of thunder, in trembling earth. Mortals lived with him, breathed his presence, and felt him in their daily lives. This intimacy made worship personal, for each person had reason to revere him. A sailor might see him as protector, a farmer as giver of rain, a king as ally. Different faces of Poseidon reflected the different needs of the people. His worship connected the entire community, from coastlines to mountains. In Corinth, the Isthmian Games honored him with horse races and music. Athletes competed not only for glory, but for the favor of the Sea Lord. To win was to be touched by divine strength, to stand as a chosen one. Temples to Poseidon stood proud, their columns carved with waves and horses. Priests guided rituals, offering bulls, rams, or libations to please the earthshaker. Even inland cities raised altars, for his quakes reached them far from the sea. The fear of trembling ground reminded all that no land was beyond his grasp. Yet alongside fear, there was wonder, awe at the beauty he bestowed. Seashells, pearls, and coral were treasures mortals saw as gifts of his realm. Stories of dolphins rescuing sailors were told as signs of his compassion. To some, these creatures were messengers, gentle guardians of the ocean's heart. The Greeks saw balance in his nature, storm and calm, wrath and kindness. They believed harmony came from honoring both sides of his divine will. Festivals celebrated not only survival, but the joy of living under his care. Songs praised his horses, swift as waves, and his trident, symbol of command. Each hymn carried the sound of tides, echoing the endless rhythm of the sea. Through worship, people found strength to face the unpredictability of life. They understood that the ocean, like fate, was beyond complete control. So prayers to Poseidon were not just fear-driven, but rooted in acceptance. To live was to trust the waters, to sail into uncertainty with hope and faith. And Poseidon embodied this truth, reminding mortals of life's fragile balance. He was not simply a destroyer, but a teacher of humility and resilience. His power carved the world, but his presence also held it together. Thus, every prayer, every offering, was more than devotion. It was survival. Through Poseidon, the Greeks embraced the sea's eternal rhythm and mystery. And in that rhythm, they found their place between land, sky, and water. For to honor Poseidon was to honor the truth that all life flowed from the sea. Poseidon's presence was not only felt in myths, but also in the daily lives of the Greeks. He was the sea at their door, the tremor underfoot, the rhythm of tides and rains. Every sunrise over the ocean was seen as a reflection of his eternal power. Every storm on the horizon was a reminder of his unpredictable and restless will. The Greeks lived in constant conversation with the sea, their prayers never ceasing. To them, Poseidon was not a distant god, but a neighbor, both feared and cherished. He stood at the threshold between survival and peril, prosperity and loss. This made their relationship with him one of both devotion and caution. One legend tells of the great contest between Poseidon and Athena in Athens. Each sought the devotion of the city, each offering a gift to its people. Poseidon struck the earth with his trident, and from it sprang a saltwater spring. The water was powerful, yet briny, a reminder of his mastery over the sea. Athena, in turn, offered the olive tree, a gift of peace, sustenance, and growth. The people chose her gift, and Athens was named in her honor, not his. But this did not diminish Poseidon's place in Greek hearts and imagination. Instead, it revealed his nature as a god of strength, not compromise. Where Athena offered wisdom, Poseidon offered power, fierce and unyielding. The contest became a tale of balance, intellect beside might, wisdom beside force. It reminded mortals that even gods could clash, shaping the destinies of cities. Though Athens was not his, Poseidon was honored there with great respect. They built temples for him, acknowledging his storms, quakes, and blessings alike. For they knew ignoring him entirely could invite waves or tremors as warning. The story of the contest spread across Greece, teaching reverence for both deities. It showed that Poseidon's gifts, though feared, were essential to human survival. Water was life, storms were renewal, and the sea was a path to distant lands. Without Poseidon's domain, no sailor could voyage, no trader could prosper. Even when his gift was refused, it was never dismissed, for it carried weight. In this way, Poseidon became more than a god of nature. He became a lesson. He reminded mortals that strength has value, even when it is not chosen. He reminded them that the sea is not always kind, but always necessary. Through myths like this, the Greeks built a worldview shaped by balance. They saw that Poseidon, though tempestuous, was part of the harmony of life. His rivalry with Athena did not make him lesser, but part of the divine story. And that story was retold in poems, plays, and songs for generations to hear. Sailors spoke of it as they rowed, invoking his name to guide their ships. Farmers spoke of it when rains came, seeing his hand in the clouds above. Children learned it at hearth fires, told by elders who feared and loved him. The myth endured not only because it was grand, but because it was true. True in the sense that mortals lived daily between wisdom and force. True in the sense that the sea could not be ignored, nor could the earth. Poseidon embodied the raw force of nature, majestic and merciless alike. His story was a reminder that power can be feared, respected, and cherished. For without it, the balance of the world would tilt into ruin and despair. And so, even in loss, Poseidon's name carried weight, echoing across Greece. His trident, symbol of might, was etched on stones, coins, and temple walls. His horses, symbols of speed, carried chariots through both fields and legends. The contest with Athena lived on, shaping Athens and honoring Poseidon too. It taught that gods gave gifts not only of peace, but of challenge. And in that challenge, mortals found meaning, resilience, and respect for life. Thus, Poseidon's story flowed like the sea, restless, unending, and eternal. Poseidon's story did not end with myths of contests or storms. It lived in the journeys of sailors. For every voyage across the Aegean was a step into his domain, a world ruled by waves and winds. The Greeks saw their ships as offerings, fragile vessels entrusted to the mercy of the sea god. Each mast that rose against the horizon was like a prayer carved into wood and sail. Before departure, sailors poured wine into the water, asking Poseidon to guide their way. They believed the ocean was alive, listening, watching, always ready to answer or to test. No journey began without his name whispered, for no mortal could master the sea alone. The ocean carried wealth, knowledge, and life, but only with Poseidon's favor was it safe. One tale tells of a fleet caught in silence, the wind gone, the sea still as glass. For days the sailors drifted, helpless, their voices lifted in prayer to the earth-shaker. At last, a breeze stirred, gentle at first, then swelling into a wind that filled the sails. They wept in relief, knowing Poseidon had heard, granting them passage once more. Such stories were told in ports and markets, spreading reverence for the sea god's hand. He was not only a storm bringer, but also the giver of wind, tide, and safe return. Every safe harbor reached was a temple of gratitude, every dock a place of thanks. To the Greeks, Poseidon was a companion on every journey, unseen but deeply felt. His trident was imagined beneath the waves, steering currents, guiding or warning men. Sailors feared his storms, but they also trusted his wisdom in the silence of seas. For sometimes the greatest lessons came not from fury, but from stillness and delay. The sea taught patience, humility, and respect, all under Poseidon's eternal gaze. And so, his myths became guides for life itself, stories shaping how men lived. In storm and calm, Poseidon was ever present, a reminder of nature's vast power. The Greeks wove his name into hymns, sung at night as ships rocked on the waves. They sang not to silence the sea, but to join it, to live within its rhythm. These songs carried faith across waters, keeping courage alive in hearts of sailors. For courage was not the absence of fear, but the acceptance of life's uncertainty. Poseidon embodied this truth, a god who gave both trials and the strength to endure. He was not simply a master of storms, but a guardian of resilience and will. Through him, sailors found faith that even in darkness, light could still break through. One could not bargain with Poseidon, only honor him, respect him, and trust his ways. In this, mortals learned the balance between fate and effort, fear and devotion. Each voyage was a lesson in surrender and perseverance, a reflection of life itself. For the sea was a mirror of the soul, vast, restless, and filled with mystery. Poseidon stood as its keeper, holding the keys to both peril and promise. The Greeks honored him because they needed him, not only in fear, but in hope. Hope that the sea would carry them home, that the earth would stand firm beneath. Hope that storms would pass and sunlight would break across the waves again. Poseidon was that hope, fierce yet faithful, untamed yet deeply present, was the god who reminded them that life, like the sea, was never theirs to control. It was theirs to navigate, to honor, to embrace, with respect for its unseen depths. Thus, every journey became not just a passage, but a prayer in motion. Every wave was an echo of Poseidon's voice, calling mortals to listen and learn. And in that voice, they found both fear and comfort, a bond with the divine. For Poseidon, lord of tempests and quakes, was the sea itself, eternal, restless, alive. The story of Poseidon is not just a myth of gods and storms, but a reflection of humanity's bond with the sea. For the sea is not only water and waves, but a living force, shaping destinies, guiding lives, and teaching respect. Every culture that touched the Mediterranean felt its breath, its rhythms, its power that could not be ignored. The Greeks saw Poseidon as a mirror of the sea's dual nature, unpredictable yet essential, harsh yet generous. His trident was not merely a weapon, but a symbol of authority, balance, and the deep mysteries of the ocean. Each strike of it was like thunder echoing across the waters, reminding mortals of their place in creation. In his depths were both peril and promise, storms that could sink ships and tides that carried them home. The people did not worship out of fear alone. They honored because they felt his presence in daily life. Farmers prayed for stable earth, sailors begged for calm waters, and cities built temples to his eternal power. He was a god who reached beyond the shore, shaping earthquakes, floods, and the shifting heart of the land. Yet his myths also spoke of compassion. When prayers were answered, when storms parted, when voyages ended safely. Poseidon was the lesson that nature is never ours to control, but only to respect and navigate with care. His tales remind us that every journey, whether across seas or through life, carries both risk and reward. The ocean does not bend to will, but it guides those who learn its language, its silence, and its song. Through Poseidon's myths, the Greeks taught that strength comes not from mastery, but from harmony with nature. They told stories to their children not to frighten them, but to give them reverence for the unseen forces. Even today, when ships cut across the same waters, Poseidon's spirit lingers in the foam and the wind. He is in the crashing waves, in the quiet tides, in the tremor beneath the earth's solid ground. When storms rise suddenly, it is his echo. When calm returns, it is his hand restoring balance again. His name still inspires, not because he was feared, but because he embodied life's eternal unpredictability. In him, we see the truth that beauty and danger often walk side by side, inseparable in existence. The Greeks found meaning in that truth, and so their hymns, prayers, and myths carried his name forward. To speak of Poseidon is to speak of resilience, of faith, of surrender and courage before vast forces. He is a reminder that no matter how advanced humanity becomes, the sea remains beyond full control. Even in the modern age, sailors honor traditions that echo ancient offerings to the Lord of the Deep. A coin tossed, a prayer whispered, a hand laid gently on the water before the voyage begins. These small acts are threads tying us back to the ancient world, where Poseidon's presence was undeniable. And in these acts, his myth is kept alive, not as superstition, but as respect for the eternal sea. The ending of his story is not truly an end. For as long as waves crash, Poseidon endures. He endures in stories told by the shore, in whispers carried by winds, in songs sung over waters. His spirit is in every horizon that stretches endlessly, reminding mortals of both their limits and their hope. For hope is what the sea gives, a promise of new lands, safe returns, and endless discovery. Poseidon is not gone. He is as alive as the ocean itself, vast, restless, and impossible to silence. His myths close with an open door, leading us back to the water, back to the rhythm of tides. And so, the tale ends where it began, with the sea with mystery and with the Lord who rules it. Poseidon, Lord of tempests and quakes, eternal in power, eternal in presence, eternal in the hearts of men.